Good morning, everyone. I'm setting these switches back up to do some more comparisons of the two transformers in this AC30, the Woden that's in it, and the sorry. Still having coffee, the Albion here. And you heard them yesterday as Transformer 1 and Transformer 2. Later in this video, I'll reveal which is which, but I want to talk about some of the reasons that we hear differences as I solder. Now, again, I mentioned it briefly in the first video, but what I am doing here is extraordinarily dangerous. Do not try at home. Some of the solder joints I'll be doing here are very much of the temporary. I would not send an amp out into the world wired this way, particularly a 63 AC30. But they are suitable for this purpose, as nothing is being jostled or transported. But aside from stuff affecting the amp, these are dangerous things to switch on the bench because we're dealing with very high voltages. Now, granted, I powered the amp off before switching and then powered it back on before playing, but still having a lot of high voltage wires just exposed on the bench. And even when you power an amp off, there's still some residual voltage. If I had grabbed this thing with my hand and switched it, especially while holding the guitar, I could have zapped myself. So I was being very careful. That's why I edited out the bits where I was making the changes, because there's a lot of time to change between the two. It's another reason I wish I'd been able to find that looper pedal. It's around here somewhere. I found a couple $1,000s worth of inventory that I did not know I had or did not know where it was. And now I know I have it and I know where it is. But I cannot find that looper pedal anywhere. But, on that subject, there are things a looper pedal does not tell you, like that feedback note. If I had recorded that feedback, that high gain stuff with the feedback with the looper pedal, and then played it with the other transformer, we would have heard the same thing. We would not have heard the difference because the interaction between the amp, the speakers, and the pickups had already occurred. So real time has its advantages, and I'm sorry that I'm not better at playing more consistently. That's a trick. If I were to set up a click track and play a part to an actual song, I could actually be pretty damn consistent. With enough coffee, I could be very consistent. But setting up a click and being able to hear that while I record and play is time consuming. I'm already dropping my solder everywhere. And then there's issues of playing songs and copyright with YouTube and all that fun stuff. I mean, a case could certainly be made, and I think it's a valid case, that anything that I do on this channel, as far as referencing songs or tones or whatever, is educational. I'm not saying, hey, everyone, come give me money by listening to my demo of, I don't know, another version of Welcome to the Jungle or whatever. Not that I don't think anyone would be foolish enough to spend money or even clicks on my versions of such things, but I'm not recording this. I'm not doing the parts as the reason anyone looks at the video. I'm trying to put amps in context, so I try to reference things that people might know and like and be interested in. If I get an amp in that has certain associations with certain players, I try to reference those things. Anyway, so I guess like I'm saying, in a very distracted way that looper pedals are fantastic for certain things in terms of consistency, but they don't give you the entire picture of how amps and guitars react. Now, notice I'm not caring which primary goes where. The AC30 has no negative feedback, so there'll be no oscillation potential here. So it doesn't matter which primary goes to which side. So I'm not taking any careful measurements or anything. I'm just attaching it, and I know that it will work. And after this, I only got one more ground connection to make. And that is the jack that I have tipped in here on this Albion. It's common and goes to this ground leg, but I forgot to take off airplane mode. Just 1 second. All right. The common of the secondary goes here, which is the ground lug, but it needs to be referenced to ground in the amp. So that's why I added this long wire here to go over here. All right. So in the video yesterday, I would have the amp powered off. I would switch it to one position or the other, both switches in the same orientation, and I would move the speaker cable to the correct jack. I could have left the wires to the jacks and just switch one was going to ground, and but I would have required another switch, or I would have had to use a 3-pole double throw. And I just wanted to get this done. I had these for another project handy, and it doesn't take long to move the cable. So that's what was happening. So while this was always in the amp, because of the way it's switched and switching the HT as well, there was never any potential interaction between the two. When this one was on, this one was off, and vice versa. So there'd be no field interaction between the two. There'd be no loading. I want to talk about briefly, hopefully briefly, I don't know. I can't promise anything's going to be brief this morning. I'm still in rambling mode. About why we heard some of the differences. And it's not that either transformer is better or defective than the other. They are both vintage correct, period correct choices for an AC30. But, what's the best way to put this? Something that people might already have experienced if you've been playing a while. This green wire is the 8 ohm tap. This blue wire is the 16 ohm tap. And I had a bit of painter's tape. I'll replace that in just a moment on that so it wouldn't touch anything that it should not yesterday. Because I'm using an 8 ohm cab. A lot of people know that if I were to disconnect the 8 ohm tap and hook up the 16 ohm tap and get that mismatch with the 8 ohm cab, 16 ohm tap, that the amp would have less volume. Not a ton, just a little less volume and a little different behavior. That's because I don't want to go too much in the technical weeds on this, but there are winds on the primary and the secondary in the power transformer. I guess it'd be going this way, actually. So that there's a ratio. And as long as, if you're using the 8 ohm tap with an 8 ohm cab, that ratio on the secondary is where it's supposed to be in proportion to the ratio on the primary. And if you change what's happening on the secondary, it throws off the ratio that the thing was designed for. And it gets less efficient, let's just say that. And so you can have a fine sound mismatching 8 ohm to 16 ohm with a 8 ohm load and a 16 ohm tap, or vice versa. It'll sound fine. It won't hurt anything, but it sounds different. You'll get less output, and the sound can change. It can be cleaner or dirtier a little bit. And because what's happening there is that load on the primary changes if the secondary load is not what it's designed to be. And as a tube becomes loaded more than it's supposed to, it becomes less efficient, and you lose output, you lose some compression. Think of it like, have you ever plugged a Strat directly into into like a Mackie mixer or any other device that really expects high impedance, and you can still hear the guitar, but it's just not right. It's dark and dull and lifeless. That's an extreme example of what happens. You get a less extreme of that with many microphones and mixers, like a 57 into a Yamaha doesn't sound that great. A 57 into an API sounds fantastic. And it's not just because the pre in an API is infinitely better than the pre in a Yamaha mixer. It's that the SM57 was designed for a much higher input impedance than a modern console like a Yamaha has, whereas the API has a higher input impedance setting. It makes a 57 shine. Just like a Strat going into an amplifier versus going straight into the board. Same thing happens at a slightly smaller scale with output tubes and primaries. Now, of the output tubes out there, EL84s are one of the most sensitive to such changes in loading, because one of the other variables which really affects EL84s is called reflected impedance. And that gets real deep in the technical weeds, and I don't know that I've had enough coffee yet to go there with you, and I certainly don't have all the proper white sheets in front of me. More on that in a moment. But EL84s are very sensitive to what's called reflected primary impedance, and that affects their high end. And that's one of the reasons a lot of EL84 circuits have what's called the cut circuit, like you have in the AC30, which rolls off the highs, feeding the input to the bank of EL84s. And that's one of the reasons if you have that cut circuit all the way counterclockwise in a Vox, the amp can be extraordinarily bright, and amps with 6V6s and 6L6s and EL34s often don't have that. They'll have a present circuit, which from the player's perspective works in a similar way, but it's doing a very different thing. And you have many amps, say a Fender Twin, which doesn't have a present circuit, doesn't have any lowering of the highs at the output, and you're fine. It doesn't sound painful because you're not turning, if you turn the tone circuit all the way up, just treble city, it'll get painful. But the tube itself inherently does not have a big bite in the high end, 5K and up. EL84s do, and the degree to which they have that emphasis, that high end, almost painful quality, it depends a lot on the primary impedance of the output transformer and the ratio of the primary to the secondary. So we've got here a Woden and an Albion, and both of them are correct for EL84s. They are both made to much the same spec. I imagine that if I were to go in here and send AC into the secondary and measure the primaries, that I would find that they have slightly different primary impedances. Maybe one's 6.2K, the other one's 6.6K. I'm pulling these numbers out of my hat. This is just a for instance. Those fairly slight differences mean that both are suitable choices for an EL84, but you will get a different sound. There are a lot of amps where that's the case. A Twin Reverb, a Deluxe, a Champ even. There are different transformers that Fender used at different periods with slightly different primary impedances. And you get slightly different sounds with those amps which have 6V6s. With slight changes in output transformers for an AC30, you can have fairly exaggerated sounds because of the reflected impedance, and also the efficiency. How much of the signal the tube sends to the transformer actually comes through the speaker. And that's when you get into the windings and the interweavings of the iron and core saturation and all these things that are certainly beyond my first cup of coffee ability to communicate to you. And again, I don't have those white papers. And I want to go into an honesty confession mode here. I don't know everything. I never pretend to. I hope never to pretend to know everything. I know how to look up almost anything I need. And in the past, I have gone down these rabbit holes with transformer windings and transformer reflected impedances and all these things. And I have walked away from that process with a good enough knowledge to make day-to-day decisions in an app. Hey, does that transformer behave well? Is it operating within the parameters? That's great. Normally, I'm not having to judge between two 63s to go into a 63. This is a very unique opportunity. Normally, I'd say, yeah, it's period correct and it's working. In a discussion, that's what it sounds like. So now I'm able to influence a choice, and I could certainly go and look all that stuff up, but I'd just be parroting it back to you. I have friends and colleagues who know much more about this, and when I run into an issue with an amp where I suspect there's a transformer issue, I'll reach out to them. I'm not Chris Marin. I don't know transformers like the back of my hand. But I know Chris Marin, and I know Joe Pampel, and I can still get in touch with Sergio at Mercury, though I miss my buddy Patrick, something fierce. And I know a lot of other guys in the industry who really know this aspect of things, who could actually sit down with graph paper and a pencil and design an output transformer and do all the math right in front of you. They're not always the best conversationalists, but they know how to do that kind of thing. And so I'm in awe of that. I know how to tell if the transformer is suitable for an amplifier and if it's working well. But I'm not going to try to impress you with all my knowledge of how interleavings of the iron work or different methods of doing the winds. But based on what we heard in yesterday's video, I suspect that one of these has a slightly different primary impedance and probably a slightly different turns ratio. And so with one of these transformers, the output was more efficient in that the output was louder with a given volume set on the amp and a given input signal. And that did not vary that much from part to part. I was playing pretty consistent levels, and certainly with the same guitar and the same settings. One of them sounded louder. And because of the nature of an AC30, when it's louder, you get compression, you get some overdrive within the output tubes. And that reflected impedance that I talked about, the high end, it's both a strength and weakness of EL84s, was more apparent on one because when the entire signal is a little bit lower, and you don't have those compression and overdrive artifacts happening, you do hear that primary reflected impedance more prominently. That's why one of them sounded cleaner and a little bit brighter. And it actually had a little bit of a sweeter low end. If you listen to that second clip with the Les Paul, when I do the little Don't Let Me Down kind of noodling around on the neck pickup of a Les Paul, it definitely had a sweeter low end. Now, as to which the owner is going to go with, that's going to be pending on the results of a test I'm about to do, because I was still a little bit concerned about that high harmonic and that odd overtone on the distorted sound with the strap. And I told him, hold off until I can recheck that, and I'm going to be walking around the room. I suspect that it's not a problem with the transformer, though someone may love that sound of the out-of-tune third. I suspect that it was because of a field, because this transformer and this transformer were both right here, and the guitar was right where I'm sitting now, and that field would be right on the pickups. And that's not how we normally play guitar. So I'm going to move the speaker cab at a different angle so I can be in a different part of the room, and I can control the angle of the guitar strings and pickups to the speakers, but I'll be well away from the fields of both transformers. And I'm going to redo that bit to be sure that there's no flaw in transformer 1, which was the one which was exhibiting that problem. Now, I have almost intentionally filled this video with a bunch of talking and theory and gobbledygook, so only those of you who are true believers get to have the secret info, though I'm sure that it'll be revealed in the comments. In yesterday's video, Transformer 1 was the Woden, and Transformer 2 is the Albion. The owner was leaning towards Transformer 2. But this is a very unique situation where the owner of this amp, the 63 AC30, has another 63 AC30, which is also here for restoration. I'm waiting for a few more parts to arrive because it's 2022 and parts take forever. I mean, seriously, 3 capacitors. Come on, guys. But it's been weeks. But his other 63 has original Albions for everything. So if he likes the sound of Transformer 2, which is the Albion, he will already have that in his other 63. So it makes a lot of sense to both him and to me for this one to have the Woden. So he has 2 different flavors. Because there is a difference. Aside from everything else, just the difference in the iron makes a difference in the sound. So if he likes that sound, he will have it in the other 63. Most people on the planet don't have a choice of 63 AC30s. This guy's very fortunate. Hell of a nice guy. He's not some blues lawyer. You know, I see some collectors who have everything under the sun and they can't play cowboy chords. This guy's the real deal, and he's really nice. And so we only hate him a little bit. I only hate him the tiniest bit for having 2 of these things, but at least I get to play with them first. But before I can wholeheartedly say, yes, let's keep this Woden, I need to make sure that there's not some problem that will make it fall apart and sound nasty with the overtones at really high gain. Now, just a note on the preferences stated in the comments yesterday. It was very odd to me. First of all, there are people for whom Transformer 2 was just the best ever, and Transformer 1 was absolute shit. Just listen to how awful that is, and then there'd be another guy like Transformer 1 is the tone of the gods, and Transformer 2 is just, oh my God, it's sterile and harsh, and the likes and dislikes for some people I thought were quite exaggerated, and people ascribe characteristics to one or the other that had no basis at all to me in my experience, and I'm the one actually in the room playing them, and the playback sound is quite accurate, by the way. I record everything at 32-bit 48K audio waveform, and I make sure that my waveforms, before they're sent to YouTube, are about 3 dB down at the peaks, which seems to keep the YouTube compression from kicking in. So as much as possible with an HD YouTube video, my audio is reliable, at least as far as what the 57 heard. So it's strange to me. It's not enough to say, hey, I like this one better than the other. People have to find terrible flaws and parallel, just ultimate compliments for the thing that they do like. I think that's very interesting. I do also find it interesting that people would like Transformer 1 better than Transformer 2 and for X, Y, and Z reasons, and then someone else would like Transformer 2 better than Transformer 1 for the same X, Y, and Z reasons. So perception is all over the place. And I wonder how many people are expressing opinions based on what they're hearing on their phone or computer speakers versus headphones or a full set of real speakers where you get a chance to come closer to hearing what it actually sounds like in the room. On that note, I did not compress the recording. I did not EQ the recording. People are unused to hearing dry, unprocessed guitar tracks. One of the things that studio engineers do on rock and country and blues records is they apply compression and EQ and other devices that make a sound being played back at 70 dB sound exciting. whereas the original part was 90 to 100 dB, which our ears perceive as exciting anyway, because there's distortion happening in our ears. Our membranes at 100 dB distort, and we hear nonlinearly. And so that loud guitar amp is very exciting. That same sound played back at conversation level, or whatever level you usually listen to your music at, in its real form, what the mic heard, is not exciting. And so you listen to a song on an album, that guitar part is usually tweaked a little bit to sound as exciting at 70 dB as it really is at 100. I have not done that because it's not about what a good recording engineer or mixer I am. It's about what does the raw, dry guitar amp sound like. And look, especially with the overdriven stuff, people are not used to hearing dry one mic recordings of overdriven guitar. And it can sound fizzy, it can sound harsh. People say it's unnatural. That's really what it sounds like. I know this is a long digressing video, but I think there are important things here to communicate about how amps work and how, they step back and look at the big picture of hitting a piece of metal with a piece of plastic and getting music and art out of it at the other end, which is a crazy, wonderful thing that we find ourselves doing. Let me have a sip of my coffee. 20-something years ago, I had a friend up in the Boston area who was very well connected in the music industry on the recording and engineering side. And he sent me a DAT. Remember those DATs back in the day? Well, I had a DAT player and he sent me a DAT. And on that DAT was absolute treasure. And I think most of it's on YouTube by now. But back in the day, it was very hush-hush. Don't tell anyone. You never had this. You never got this from me. Careers and lawsuits were on the line. When they had done the remastering of all the Zeppelin catalog, someone involved in that process had taken snippets, raw tracks from the masters. The kind of stuff you see Rick Beato do, where he has the entire production up in Pro Tools and he can say that this is track 17, this is track 22, this track's got backing vocals and tambourine, whatever. I love that stuff. But I had the DAT and it had individual tracks off Zeppelin 2. And not just individual tracks, but the individual, channels on the board. And one of the things that just blew my mind was it had the solo from Heartbreaker. And it had two things. One was what the amp sounded like to the close mic, what the actual amp sounded like. And the other one was the room mics from the drum kit. And the actual amp sound, the sound for the solo for Heartbreaker, was terrible. It was tinny and thin and had almost a kazoo-like quality on some notes, and it had a real splatty attack, and it was no one's idea of what a guitar should sound like. And if you listen to the stuff in the room mics from the drum kit, it was all muffled and blurred and over-reverbed and crazy reflections and nothing at all worth listening to. Just, someone's 3 doors down playing a guitar solo. But if you listen to both tracks together, oh my God, it was Heartbreaker. That's the sound. And so it's all these pieces of the puzzle. And even were I to wake up one day magically transformed and playing at the level of Jimmy Page in 1970, if I'm recording unprocessed guitar here for you guys with one mic relatively close to the speaker, I try to be within 6 inches to keep the room reflections out. Nothing I play for you will ever sound like that. Sorry, just not going to happen. So anyway, I guess that's enough yapping. I'm going to power this on, and I want to make sure that the overdrive and overtone series, when really distorted with this Woden, are fine as long as the guitar is far enough away. I'm not going to move the camera. You're going to have to trust what I'm doing, the same big A chord I did yesterday. I may do a few other notes just to hear. This is a check. I just want to make sure that there's nothing wrong with this transformer before I tell the owner, yep, let's go with that one. So let me get set up to do that, and we will resume. All right, after doing all that, I feel safe in saying that the awful overtone I was getting yesterday was the field of the transformer affecting the pickups of the guitar, because I wasn't getting those unpleasant overtones. I get more or less, depending on how I angle the guitar towards the speakers. You know, everyone knows those tricks. If I had touched the headstock to the cab, we would have had amazing feedback, infinite. But there were no nasties. So that was Strat, Les Paul, and SG. And the subtitle of this video could be Why I Also Own an SG. But I feel very safe in recommending either transformer to the owner. I think, like I said, since he already has a 63 with a Albion, it makes sense to keep the Woden in here. And again, Transformer 1 in the previous two videos was the Woden. Transformer 2 is the Albion. And I'll let you guys duke it out as to which of you is right, as to which one is better, because that's the way the world works.